Welcome to the NJC YouTube channel. This is your monthly dose of the Tom and Terry Show. Got that right. Didn't say Jerry, nearly said Jerry. But yeah, welcome to the Tom and Terry Show. How are we doing, Tom?
I'm very good, thank you, Terry. How are you?
It's not delighted to be here because today we are answering a very specific question about the DVSA. So I'm looking forward to talking about that. Before we get stuck into that, I do want to say that we're going to be doing these every month, and we are doing one for this public channel as we will be doing going forward. But we'll also be going to do one for the ADINJC members, specifically for members of the NJC. How much does that cost to become a member, Tom?
It is £4.50 a month, a measly
Mate,
£4.50.
get it for less than that as well, can't you?
Yeah. So if you're a member of a group, local association or group, you can get it for £2.50 a month.
Or the Instructor Podcast Premium. Didn't say that. Whatever. Yes. Who said that? Anyway, yes, we're going to be talking about DVSA today because we've got a very specific question from Chris Benstead, who is a member of the ADINJC. And Chris's question is, should the DVSA have more power, specifically over franchises and or schools? This is a question that's been on my mind a lot recently, and I don't know the answer. So I'm going to come to you first, Tom. Should DVSA have more power?
Um, my initial thing is no. However, it's kind of it's not very, it's a rather loaded question, I suppose, isn't it? It doesn't explain too much about what that power would be. However, my concern is that they have already got quite a lot on their plate at the moment, and as they are sort of there just to assess the standards of driving instructors and of tests being delivered, is that without out of their remit? Well, out of their remit is my initial feelings.
I'm on the fence with this one. I've got to be honest because a little bit like you, they've got a lot on their plate, and I also think what they do have on the plate, they don't always do very well. Do we want the DVSA taking control of things like driving schools and franchises and even training? Do we want them doing that? And I don't think so. I think that, be careful what you wish for almost. But on the flip side of that coin, I think something needs to be done. It's unscrupulous, some of the stuff that goes on. It's unfair, it's unethical, and it's damaging the industry. So I'm kind of stuck on that middle point, and I know you're saying no, but I think you asked someone else said yes. Am I right?
That's correct. I asked my friend ChatGPT, and they said yes, actually, that their take was the DVSA could be given targeted additional powers, and this would be mandatory reporting from franchises, things like complaints, safeguarding. They would have auditing, training quality with larger schools. That I think is a good point. And then setting contractual fairness benchmarks, which again I think is a good thing. But are we kind of going down the line where we say that actually they don't have overall power, but they should be setting some maybe or they have some regulatory powers that says actually this needs to be fair. You need to have these things in place if you're going to be running these schools. Maybe that would be more of a halfway marker.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I think that there needs to be some sort of regulation there because, although having said that, can we? Because you look at learning to drive, you go to the basics of it. You don't need to be an instructor to teach someone to drive. You don't need to be trained to teach a driving instructor. You can just teach your mates to become a driving instructor as long as you're not getting paid for it or whatever. And you don't need anything within the industry to run a school. So if the DVSA were to put some kind of regulation there, would we need regulation everywhere through all aspects of it?
Wow. Yeah. Well, yes, probably. But I don't think that that's always a good thing because you can almost get too much restriction and perhaps too much sort of DVSA having these full-blown sort of business powers, I suppose, that actually is that within their remit? Should they really be doing those types of things?
Thinking about it as well, if you almost look at it from the top down, so if you've got the driving school, and that driving school is training instructors and it's training learners and fleet and everything. If that driving school is getting it right and displaying best practice, then that should cascade down for everyone else anyway. So I suppose, you know, potentially would make sense to focus on the driving school. So you mentioned some points there. If regulation was to come in, what would you like to see come in?
Um, I think there needs to be fairness to the trainees that are coming into that driving school. There needs to be a fairness, and we've heard there's been stuff in the media recently with a driving school owner who went through court processes, and some of the stuff that came out from that. I think we as an association, we hear from members who contact us and saying, look, I'm in a pickle. And I know that this happens in everyday life. People focus on money. It's difficult for trainees who are coming into the industry, because I find it's not until they're halfway in the industry they realise they're then in a pickle and there were other and perhaps better options. So if there was fairness for them, that should be something that I think should be regulated, but I don't know how it would happen.
I suppose there's a way for you have to sign up to something within the DVSA beforehand. So it could be something that the DVSA mandates you sign on, mandates you read beforehand to explain everything. But I mean, I could say they're not going to do that, but this is a question: should they be doing that? But I suppose the flip side is, could we be doing that? You know, whether that's the NJC or NASP or whatever, a guidelining body. Maybe this is a future episode. I don't know of this is what to expect. But I agree with that. I think that people are being let down. There's people coming into the industry now that are being told, "Yeah, we'll get you passed in a few months." Well, for just the test alone, when we're looking at it, but also that idea of rushing it and how do we impact that? So put aside the DVSA for a second, which I know was the topic of the question, but I'm curious, how do we impact that, as whether that's as the NJC, whether that's as business owners, whether that's as individual instructors? What can we do, Tom, to get that message across more?
I think it's demonstration quite a lot of the time. It's for us to show best practice. It's for us to be the change and not just talk about the change. If we want to actively do this, we have to be fair to trainees that might come to us. We have to be fair with any contracts that are being written. And I think for one of the things that always stands out for me is that if I don't deliver the training that I've sold, well, then people should be able to go elsewhere. They should be able to go and seek training that didn't work for them. And, I'm old enough and miserable enough to realise that I'm not going to be everyone's cup of tea. And if we start doing training and that's not working, the national standards that everybody kind of talks about, it says in there about the importance of, if you can't deliver what you should be delivering to somebody to help them, we should accept that we can help them move to somebody else who can. And that's with a learner, that's with a trainee. It should go through the whole of the spectrum.
I might have this slightly wrong, but the national standards, is it now recommended reading? The DVSA are pushing that out more? Yeah.
Yeah, like it shouldn't ever have been reading before.
But, when I trained, and it wasn't that long ago, it was only 7 or 8 years ago, I didn't know what they were. I first come across them when I was recording something for my podcast and someone mentioned it. I'm like, oh, I best go find out what they are,
Yeah.
and that could be the thing. If it was mandated somehow, regulated, that you must read the national standards before signing a contract, that would go a long way towards it. Maybe not a long way, but at least that would be a start, giving people of an idea of what they actually do. It's not just sitting in a car and doing this. And I think there's a concern for me always around regulation. You're heading towards a nanny state, but we need to put labels on bleach that says "do not drink," because if we didn't, there would be some people that drank it, and there's still some people that drank it. There was a trend a while ago, wasn't there, about drinking washing up pods or something?
Yeah.
There's still people that do it. So I think there needs to be some regulation in there. If it wasn't a DVSA, is there anyone else that could put the regulation in? Or would it have to be a DVSA thing? It would, wouldn't it?
Wow. Yeah, I suppose Department of Transport maybe, or we'd have to look higher above that. I think the thing that frustrates me is we could change it tomorrow. But what that would rely on is the 42,500 ADIs on the register would all need to agree. And, you can't even get them to agree whether it's clutch first or bike first or gas first. So, how are we ever going to be able to get that type of information from them? But I see the potential where if we did have that agreement and we could all move forward with it, I do think we could make that change. Whether that is us as an industry, whether it's national associations. And I do think that there are lots of people out there who would want the DVSA to have more of an input because they see them as this regulatory figure, but I don't necessarily think we need to wait for them. However, it may have more of an impact if they were doing it.
I think that clutch versus bike example is a really good one because there is a third option, which is it depends. And there's the exception to every rule, but there isn't in some cases. And
Mm,
go back to the driving school thing, the idea of fairness, there's not an exception to that. We
no.
need to treat people fairly. But there are a lot of driving schools out there that don't, whether it's the way that they structure their contract, whether it's the way that they, the way they train, whatever it is, they're not treating people fairly. No, I don't know. I just feel like something needs to be done because all we can do is talk about it. Do you think the DVSA will ever regulate it?
That is a good question. I don't know. I'm struggling to see how and what their vision is, even for the next 5 years, because we're still in the situation that we're in. I'm definitely not blaming. I mean, we say DVSA, but they've got lots of different parts. You can have an examiner who's doing really, really well, but we class them as DVSA. They're still in a very awkward situation, and I feel sorry for them because they've got a very difficult path in front of them. And I think they're restricted a lot with regulations. They're restricted with stuff that Department of Transport say they can or can't do. They're restricted by politicians who are also looking to favour their career. Maybe that's a different conversation. So it's going to be a difficult one. I just don't know what the answer would be and how they could implement that within the next few years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. I don't know whether in the next 25 years will there still be a DVSA? Will it be privatized? Will it be another picture altogether? Who knows?
Politicians favoring their career. We'll put that one behind the paywall, I think. Um, yeah, do you know what? That's a good point. We don't know what the future holds for the DVSA because, if we're being honest, at the minute it's just not working, is it?
No.
So, I think that do you know what? I think it's worth talking about audit a little bit here as well. I think this ties into this because if you think of what audit is or what it should or could be, that's a start. It's not regulation, but it's potentially the start of regulation. It used to be that thing where go to an audit trainer. And now, please correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, but I believe it was Lynn Barry that said it recently, or explained to me recently, that now if you fail your part two, part three, examiners no longer suggest to go to an audit trainer. They just suggest to get further training. So, where's audit at the minute?
Um, what I will clarify first of all, Terry, just for those who perhaps don't know. So, audit is the official register of driving instructor trainers. It was taken over by DVSA many years ago, and it is an additional test that you can go and do. I won't go too much into it, but it's an additional test you can go and do, which means that you're then on an additional register with the DVSA and you can be suggested as a trainer for driving instructors, PDIs, and ADIs. The current situation with audit is that it is closed for new applicants. Those currently on it, even though their audit badge will have expired, they're still on the register. We've not heard any official updates from DVSA of where it will be. I've had quite a few conversations with different examiners and management staff. They all seem sort of on the same page that they would like to bring it back. They feel like it's very important, but I just don't know. It won't be a priority for them at the moment because of the things that we've already spoken about. But you're right, that was kind of a way of almost regulating the training system, but it fell down because it's voluntary. So you can choose to go on it, you can choose to not go on it. And I think most people in the industry will agree there are some really good audit trainers out there. There are perhaps not some good audit trainers out there. There are also some really good trainers who are not on the audit register, and a mixture of all of those. But the idea was good, and I think the idea that there would be some kind of regulatory system to support driving schools, or not necessarily support them, but to support the trainees more and for that fair system, that runs alongside that kind of audit mentality.
I think I agree. The idea was good. It's obviously not working in execution now, and I think that anyone that's audit trained should still be proud to be audit trained and still champion that. But I don't think the concept of it works, and I don't think the concept of it means as much now.
No,
Again, to the individual, yes, 100%, you should be proud and you should shout about that. But it's the reason I'm saying it's not working so much as well is because if someone isn't audit trained, well, they can't become audit registered now. So
no.
it's, it's almost looking at both sides. But I think they've missed a trick here. I think that a couple of years ago, this could have been the thing that got this kick started. Even if it wasn't mandatory, even if it stayed voluntary, there's ways to push that and talk about that and promote it in such a way and make a bigger deal of it. So again, when you apply for your test, for your part one test, there could be documentation that comes through there saying about what audit is your trainer audit trained? And you could get more comms from the DVSA talking about that. So even if it remained voluntary, that could be brought back and put on a pedestal
Mm.
and made something that people want to aspire to if it was done properly. Would that work?
Would that work? Um,
Would that be a start?
well, yeah, okay. Yes, I think it would be a start. And I think it's trying to move in the right direction. It's finding the path of least resistance that will work for everybody. Um, and I think this does fit hand in hand to a certain degree. I think if you make it very easy, so anybody can train driving instructors, we've kind of mentioned this, and anybody could start up a driving school and start to recruit franchisees and, do get people in to do training. Because it's quite easy to do, lots of people can go and try and do it and be successful or unsuccessful. Where I think if it was a little bit harder to do, the people who really want to do it would be more inclined to go and do it. And that might then lead to it having better content because there's a will behind it as opposed to, actually, I'm just going to do a driving school and make lots of money.
No, I agree. I think I want to come back a little bit to specifics of the question, which was the DVSA and driving schools and regulating them, because we touched on a couple of things there. And like you mentioned the contract before, it's been reported recently about how that's been taken to court, and again, people can look that up. I don't want to get into the legalities of it, but I think there's definitely some of that could be regulated in contracts as well. Some people might like this, and it's going against what some people like potentially, but I don't believe we should be setting 2-year contracts where you've got to sign up for 2 years and you're not allowed to leave in that time. I believe contracts need to be a lot more flexible. I think we also need to look at what a franchise is. It's just something I've spoken about previously. The best the best example of a franchise in the world is McDonald's and the way
Mm.
they run their stores. That is a proper franchise. Whereas you look at a driving school, often it's not. It's not
No.
a franchise. You just turn up, you put your top box on, you get given customers, and you turn out and deliver those lessons. You don't run that business yourself. Your driving school's almost running it for you, but not being trained how to run that business. So that would be something else I would suggest that if there was some regulation coming, it was regulated that you're not just trained to teach students, which is obviously the key thing, but you're trained on how to run a business. You're trained on how to look after yourself because it is a lonely profession. Even now, we've got all these wonderful resources and communities out there. You're still alone in the car with a student. You're still driving away from that student by yourself afterwards. So, yeah, I would say that we want to be, if we regulate it, we want to be regulating the business and the health side as well. Anything else you might want to look at regulating there, or at least adding in?
I mean, everything, everything that you can. I think there has been over history, there has been this. How can I put this? There's been perhaps this vision for some where it's about getting trainees in, making money from them, and not necessarily worrying about creating good driving instructors. You and I have had conversations about how important road safety is, but I wonder whether that needs to be one of our focus. Instead of just saying, I'm going to train you to be a driving instructor, but I'm going to restrict some of this stuff so you don't know how to run your own business, so you rely on me, your franchisor, or the owner of the driving school. It needs to have more availability, that we are creating road safety professionals. And that links to kind of what I was saying earlier. It should be available for people who really want to do it, and not people who think, do you know, I'm just going to give it a go. But at the same time, I realise that's really stupid, because that was me 13 years ago, where I went, I don't really want to be a driving instructor, but I'll do it for a short time because I can see it's going to help me along. 13 years later, if I met my past self, I'd be slapping them going, you're being stupid. Why would you choose to do that? But look where I am now. So I realise it's not a clear cut thing.
There's a lot of context to this, isn't there? A lot of,
Yeah.
but all right, you mentioned there about people coming into the industry, and if you think about why we might want something regulated, or rules put in place, I suppose it's primarily to look after the ADIs, the PDIs, and people coming in. So it's probably worth just taking a moment to maybe offer a bit of advice around this. So anyone coming into the industry now that's watching this, and they're either just started or just starting out, what would you tell them to watch out for in terms of a driving school and potentially the training as well?
I mean, with everything, it's about, what are you putting in to what are you getting out? What is your goal? Are they going to be able to help you to achieve that goal? But with any kind of legal contract that you're going into, you need to know the ins and outs of it before you sign anything. It's very difficult, I think, for new trainees coming into the industry, because they don't know what they don't know. People always don't know what they don't know. But as we get more experience, we realise there was gaps in our knowledge. But I think it's also important that we recognise there are lots of good driving schools out there who are really good at what they do. They are really good at delivering training. They're really good at looking after their trainees. And those are the ones that are standing at the forefront. They might not always be the biggest, but they're standing at the forefront of showing others this is what it should be like. So go and research different schools, chat to people. Don't just chat to the person on the end of the phone. Chat to the owners, chat to the trainer that's going to be delivering you training. Because if you're going to go and spend 40, 50, 60, 80 hours with them, you need to make sure they're the right fit for you. Because ultimately you are buying that service. And that is something that I think trainees need to be able to see, is just like they would go and hire a painter or hire somebody to do their electrics at home. They're buying that service. It's them that needs to receive the quality they want, and looking into those things, making sure you understand the contracts, meet the people you're going to be training with, understand what happens if you're unsuccessful. Do you owe any more money? I mean, you could do a whole nother conversation on what the suggestions would be, but those are kind of my main bits.
I second all that. I think I'd just chuck in there as well that kind of touched on it before. Find out what they're going to train you and help you with. They're going to train you in car. Are they going to help you and train you to run a business? And are they going to help you and train you to look after yourself in terms of your health as well? So I'd say chuck those in. But when we look at this question, Tom, should the DVSA regulate driving schools? In one word, should the DVSA regulate driving schools? What's your thoughts? But not in one word, but in a couple of words.
Maybe.
Maybe. So you shifted from no to maybe. ChatGPT said yes.
Yeah.
I think I'm still maybe. I think I'm
Yeah.
still maybe. I would like regulation there, but probably not from the DVSA.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best kind of answer we can give. There should be more regulation. It should be fairer for the trainees as well as the driving schools because they have to protect themselves, and that is just as important. Whether the DVSA are in the correct position and the right department or right people to do that, I don't know whether we can answer this in 15, 20, 30 minutes. And I don't think I'm qualified enough to give the answer anyway, but I do think it should. Whether it's them, who knows?
I don't know about you, but I've quite enjoyed this Tom and Terry discussing the DVSA. I try not to talk about DVSA too much.
Yeah, but occasionally we have to mention them, don't we?
Yeah. Well, let's just take a minute because I would say that anyone that's watching or listening potentially to this, add to the comments and share it. Give us your feedback. What do you think? Should the DVSA be regulating driving schools? Should they be regulating anything? Should we be regulating the DVSA? And if you've got any topics or questions you'd like to cover in future, again, head to the comments in this and let us know. And while you're there, make sure you are clicking subscribe. But we are also doing more of these for the premium, the ADINJC membership. Remind us how much that is, Tom, and where people can sign up.
That is £4.50 a month. Or if you're with a group, it can be £2.50 a month. And go to adinjc.org.uk and you can register there or find us on Facebook and other social media platforms.
And there's very probably a link in the comments somewhere as well, or in the description. So go there as well. But yeah, I really enjoyed this, Tom. Tom and Terry, let's do more. Welcome to the NJC YouTube channel. This is the Tom and Jerry Show, your monthly dose of a bit of Tom and Terry. I said it. I said Terry. I said Jerry. Fuck. There you go. It's in my head.
Oh, I was just going to roll with it because I thought that would be brilliant.